This week I had the fortunate or unfortunate opportunity to speak to a fellow on the phone for a few hours who grew up Frum, who went off. Who was on his way out. It looks like. Hopefully that won't be the case. But certainly his line of questioning is such. And the truth of the matter is, I wonder how many people are there out there who look from, who have all the trappings and continue to practice all the rituals, and yet in their heart of hearts they've checked out. A lot. That's right. I'm choshed that there is a lot, and I'm thinking now, although this wasn't my topic for the night, I want to start with it and let's see where this takes us. Essentially, how to answer the apikoros. And not just how to answer the apikoros, but perhaps how to answer the apikoros in yourself. Some part of you that doubts, some part of you that is unsure, that wonders, that questions, perhaps it's all make-believe, perhaps it's a lie, maybe I'm doing the wrong thing, right? It's a very scary prospect, right? Things have changed a lot in the Jewish world. And I want to explain where things used to be, where they are now, and perhaps give you a few tools how to fight them. It used to be, for hundreds and actually thousands of years, that the Jewish people worked on a premise of emunah pshuta. Emunah pshuta means you believe there is Hashem and you believe that Hashem exists, and that's all there is to it. And anyone who questions is not to be listened to, and anything that seems to fight against emunah pshuta, simple faith, we don't want to hear it. We don't want to hear it. Emunah pshuta is a very admirable quality. It is actually a quality of love. Because when a person is in love, they have emunah pshuta. Emunah pshuta, right? If someone says to me, or someone says to somebody who's madly in love, I think your wife or your husband's unfaithful. If they're madly in love and they have the eyes open, they'll say, I'm not even going to entertain your statement because it's ridiculous. Right? It's ridiculous. Emunah pshuta. I have simple faith. Ani ma'amin b'emunah shlema. I have simple faith. Now, the truth of the matter is, HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not begin the Jewish people's journey in Yiddishkeit with emunah pshuta. Quite the opposite. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, I want you to believe and know because you saw. Because you have seen evidence, because you have heard evidence. That's why we say in Adon Olam, V'yodata hayom v'hashavos el avavecha, ki Hashem hu Elokim. V'yodata hayom, you should know today, v'hashavos el avavecha, and then put it in your heart. First, have knowledge. Look, see, understand, it makes sense, it's true, right? You were standing there at the mountain, you heard Hashem speak, there's no question. Hashem did not start off Judaism saying, you know what? Just believe. Just believe. I'll whisper it to Moshe Rabbeinu into his ear, and then he'll tell you, and I want you to have emunah pshuta, simple faith. That's not what he did. He said, I want you to be there at the mountain. Not only that, he made sure. You ever wonder why hospitals are called Mount Sinai? Why do we have a hospital? Do we have Mount Sinai in New York? Why are hospitals called Mount Sinai? Maimonides, I understand. Maimonides, Rambam was a doctor. Why are hospitals called Mount Sinai? Because Hashem made sure that every person who was ill, who was sick, who was lame, who was blind, would be cured so that they would be at the mountain. So our Sinai, Mount Sinai, was the place of being cured from illness. And thus, hospitals called Mount Sinai. That's where we get cured from illness. Because Hashem did not want anyone to say, the reason I don't really believe, because I wasn't there. I was crippled. Now you're not crippled. I was deaf. Now you're not deaf. I was blind. Now you're not blind. Everyone's got to be there. No one should have an excuse. And not only that, but I want you to repeat that you saw it every single year to your family, and every single day in Kriya Shema. Again, Hashem took you out. He brought you to the mountain. It's one of the Sheish Zechirs. We have to remember, HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought us to Har Sinai. That's it. So in the beginning, we did not begin with Emunah Pshuta. We began with Yodat Hayom. As time went on, Emunah Pshuta certainly was the way to go. Simply because we were many, many generations away from the Mount Sinai, the Har Sinai episode. How many generations are we away from Har Sinai? Approximately. Now, every generation's parent-child. How many parent-childs are we away from Har Sinai? Thousands?
No. It's not less.
We are between 100 and 120.
Oh, okay.
Which is not actually that much. That's the truth. It's not really so much, because the story of Har Sinai and the Masorah can quite easily pass to 100 people. Imagine 100 people standing in line, but not just one line of 100 people, but millions of lines of hundreds of people. And if anyone gets it wrong, you got millions of lines to correct it. All it has to do is go through 100 people. That's 4 classrooms. And with lots of corrections. It's not people like, thousands of years ago. It was 100, perhaps 110 generations, 110 father to children. And they heard about it every single year, and it was the talk ever since they were able to say, Tar Tzivalan Moshe. Okay. Emunah Pshuta. We believed with perfect faith. Now, when the Industrial Revolution began, when mankind began to delve into the sciences, religion got very nervous. And the reason religion got nervous was, in a world that God controls, the world is full of mysteries. The more we can understand said religion, the less control God has, because we understand how A led to B. Now, that whole premise is a wrong premise. Because for A to lead to B, you need a rule of nature. Follow me here, okay? For A to lead to B in a predictable way, you need a rule of nature to dictate that A will lead to B. How do we know this? Because whenever things change, whenever we discover things, whenever we can rely on things in nature, we rely on them using rules that we know. Whether the rule is gravity, whether the rule is survival of the fittest, whether the rule is how light travels. There is a rule that we rely on. If we didn't have a rule, then we couldn't figure anything out in science, because we would have nothing to base it on. We need a rule, and this fits into those rules. The problem with a consistent rule is a consistent rule screams consistency. It screams order. If the world came on its own, then the world is a product of chaos. And from chaos comes chaos. So the very fact that science has reliable rules screams creator. Because you can't have a reliable rule without order. And nature without the Almighty is total chaos. They like to say if you have, 1,000 monkeys in a room on typewriters, for millions of years, the truth of the matter is eventually they'd type out Shakespeare. Do you think they would type out Shakespeare? No. So what they did is they actually created a scientific experiment. They ran a computer program based on the randomness that one would expect from a monkey, and they did it with, I can't quote all the details. It was a long time ago when I read about this experiment, but suffice it to say that many hundreds of thousands of monkeys over many millions of years couldn't put together an eloquent sentence or even a coherent one. You understand? It's just not so. It's just not so. So once we rely on nature, then we're relying on the rules of nature. Once you rely on the rules of nature, then already you're taken out of chaos. And if you're taken out of chaos, then God has to run the world. But for whatever reason, religions, in particular Christianity, were very nervous whenever science came into being, whenever science proposed something. It's like we had mentioned earlier, Galileo, when he decided that the world, that the earth revolves around the sun instead of the sun revolving around the earth, he was condemned to his house the rest of his life. He was imprisoned. Why? Because science said if the sun revolves around the earth, then that means the earth is the pinnacle of creation. Man is the pinnacle of earth. Man is the pinnacle of God's creation. That fits in beautifully to the story of the Torah. And if that's the case, then we have nothing to worry about. That makes sense. But if the earth revolves around the sun, then we're not so important, because whoever's in the center must be the most important one. And therefore, what do we do with God? And Galileo said that the earth revolved around the sun. And therefore, that somehow pulled the rug out of the whole God, Torah, Bible story. So assumed the church. And the church said, you know what? We can't have you propagating this. We can't have you indoctrinating people with this. And they threw it out. And they threw out this idea, and they condemned him to prison. How do we look at the earth revolving around the sun? Does that take away at all from the fact that the Almighty runs the world? Not in the least. Not in the least. So that's how Hashem made it. Hashem, in His infinite divine wisdom, understood that you need a sun this big and an earth this big, and if it revolves around it, then it's going to function perfectly. And the truth of the matter is, nothing is in the center of anything. The world is just one very, very, very gigantic world. What makes the center of what? The bottom line is, it doesn't take away from the fact that the Almighty created the world. In the very same way, when we learn things in science today, it doesn't take anything away. If it's true, we have another insight into the wonderful, beautiful world that the Almighty made. Fantastic. Fantastic. What's the problem? We don't have to be scared. That's not Jewish theology. That's not how we look at the world. If science is right, fantastic. Gewaldig. Now we understand. DNA, fantastic. We understand. It's such a beautiful thing. In the olden days, they didn't need it. There was a Emunah Pshuta. There was no science that was screaming. There weren't universities in there that Jews used to attend en masse. They weren't allowed to. And there certainly was not the internet with the blogs that exist out there. Today's a little bit different. Today, there's a lot of information. And it's good information. It's information that we use. If you have a BlackBerry or an iPod, you use science. You use Einsteinian science in order to use your BlackBerry. You have to. Because BlackBerries and iPhones are calibrated based on the idea that gravity affects time. So in order for the satellites to figure out where you're located, and in order for them to transmit properly, we have to take Einsteinian math and science into the equation. That's fine. We're not scared. We have nothing to be afraid of. So it could be the idea of Emunah Pshuta, without knowing anything at all, is not for everyone. It's not for everyone. We know some very big people, including my own mashgiach in the yeshiva. I went to the yeshiva of Staten Island, or Moshe Feinstein's yeshiva. And the mashgiach was a man named Gershon Weiss. And Gershon Weiss used to say all the time, I keep a science book in the bathroom. I read the bathroom. I don't want my mind to go blank. I don't want to think about Torah. I learn about science. And to me, it's niflo saboyre. We have nothing to be worried about. Now, an important thing to know about science is the following. Science tells me how. Religion tells me why. When science encroaches on religious territory, science has overstepped its bounds. It should only be telling me how. But what happens is, science has become a religion unto itself. Science, all on its own, has been dictating to people what they should believe. There was a fellow, and by the way, don't think that it's not science's agenda to debunk God, because it is. It is their agenda. At the very heart of science, we want to have control over our world, and we don't want to have a variable that we can't control. And that variable is God. That variable is God. What do we do with God? The Michtav Me'Eliyahu says that if a scientist says, you know what? I am going to decide whether God exists on my own. I'm not going to be biased one way. I won't be biased the other way. Says the Michtav Me'Eliyahu, baloney. Impossible. For a scientist, no matter what, no matter how glop he thinks he is, no matter how smart and how straight and how earnest and how honest he's trying to be, at the end of the day, the science is a basar v'dam. The scientist is a basar v'dam. He's flesh and blood. And flesh and blood has flesh and blood desires. And at the end of the day, the scientist wants to do his own thing. He wants to do his own thing. And therefore, I would rather God didn't exist than God does exist. And now I have to deal with this variable I can't understand and an outcome I can't control. I would rather God didn't exist. Albert Einstein was the greatest scientist who ever lived. No question about it. And yet Albert Einstein made a colossal mistake, a famous mistake. And it's a mistake that if he had looked in his own papers, he would have realized he was making a mistake. And he ended up looking. He saw that he made the mistake, but he said, my papers have to be wrong. You know what the mistake was? The mistake was he wanted to understand what kind of a universe do we live in. You see, there are three choices. You have a static universe, always remains steady. You have a universe that's oscillating in and out. In and out means it expands until like a rubber band that snaps back, collapses on itself, and then expands again. Or we have an inflationary universe, a universe that just expands. Now, the problem with a universe that just keeps on expanding is that, how did it start? And if it is always expanding, it means it must have had a beginning. In order for it to have a beginning, there must be something or someone that began it. Which means God. Or Creator. Whatever you want to call him. Some force that triggered the universe to come into being. So Albert Einstein said, I cannot believe in an expanding universe. I can't believe in it, because if I believe in it, then I have to believe in God. And therefore, he said, I'm not going to believe in it. I will believe in a static universe. It just is out there. I won't believe in an expanding universe. I won't believe that the universe began with what we call a Big Bang or a sudden explosion or something. I won't believe it. There was no beginning. Because if there was a beginning, there was a God. It wasn't until many years later that he had to admit that there was a beginning and the universe is expanding. When they heard the echo of the Big Bang. We're not going to get into it, but there was an echo of the Big Bang. If the world had a start, then the echo of that start should still be in the universe. And we have discovered that echo. It does exist exactly like was predicted. Why did Einstein not want to believe it? Even though his papers were clear. They were clear that the world must be expanding, because he didn't want to believe in a God. The greatest scientist today is a man named Stephen Hawking. Stephen Hawking is a fellow, he's in a wheelchair, he has Lou Gehrig's disease, but he is considered the greatest scientist of our day. He wrote a book called A Brief History of Time. He did work on black holes. He came out with a book this year, Why the Universe Does Not Need God. Now, the very fact that you would name a book, I hope I'm not paraphrasing, but if I'm off with a word or two, but that's the title. Why we don't need God. Why the universe does not need God. Or why science does not need God. We don't need God. We have figured it all out. It's figured out. Stephen Hawking, the greatest scientist today, says I just figured out how even the Big Bang doesn't need God. So this tells you that a scientist, and the very heart of the matter, and in his very soul, in his very essence, that's what he wants to prove. That's the great question. Are we alone in this universe, or are we a product of design? And if we're a product of design, there has to be a designer. And therefore, that deserves to be a title of a book. You know what the problem is? The problem is that Stephen Hawking is I feel bad for him, sitting there in the wheelchair. He has to speak through a computer. But he's still arrogant. He's still arrogant. You see, this is the same Stephen Hawking that had an issue, without getting into what the issue was, about black holes. He wanted to understand what happens to the mass when it goes into a black hole. And he came up with a theory. And this theory of black holes was his claim to fame. He was so sure of it. Until a little Yidila, who was a vacuum cleaner salesman named Suskind, who later on became a scientist, went and disproved the great Stephen Hawking. And wrote a book, How I Disproved Stephen Hawking. And Stephen Hawking admitted that he was disproven. Eventually. Not right away. But eventually he did admit it. So if he can admit that he messed up, that he made a mistake, then where is the humbleness before putting out a book that God doesn't... Hello, you already saw you made a mistake. You're ready to write out God now? Maybe another vacuum cleaner salesman going to debunk you. You ready to write out the Almighty? So that's where science is. Science is very confident. We have nothing against science. We love science. Wonderful. Because what really is science?
Just validates what the Torah.
Right. Science, it's in Torah. It exists. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. It's marvelous. As long as it doesn't start telling me why. As long as it sticks to how. Sticks to how? Thumbs up. Start telling me why? Overstepped its bounds. That's what science does. We have nothing to be afraid of. And I will tell you something else. Even when it comes to things like evolution, we have nothing to be afraid of. How did HaKadosh Baruch Hu make the world? He didn't say. He didn't say. He put 45 psukim or so into Parshas Bereshis, and he said, let there be light, there was light. He said, let there be this, let there be that, and there was. That's it. He didn't say. So I have to go about and try to postulate, well, it all came boom. Maybe it didn't come boom. Maybe Hashem used evolution as the tool. Maybe he did. I want to tell you something. If you've never heard this, it's worth listening to. I studied evolution. I was a college rabbi, and I had to debate it. I used to get into debates with professors and religious people. Evolution has a vision of the world, that the world started, boom, came into being. Eventually, you've got atmosphere. You have different. Without getting into all the details, you get different elements. Different elements form. Eventually, you've got the earth. Earth comes into being later on, according to science. Okay, you got the ground, then you've got the water that comes about. Where the water come from, no one really knows, but water came. Okay, then you've got water, and then eventually you have creepy, crawly things. You got your amoebas, you got your tricholobites, you got all these things swimming around the water. Eventually you've got fish, you've got birds, you've got dinosaurs. Time moves on according to science. You've got mammals, you've got more modern man, and eventually you've got Us, we're at the very end of the evolutionary clock. We're at the very end. That is evolution according to science. What did I just do? I just went through Parshas Bereshis. Parshas Bereshis is exactly what evolution says. It's pretty amazing. You have to understand how amazing that is. You see, our Torah was given 3,300 years ago plus. Now, for those who don't want to believe, and they say the Torah was written by man, go back into history books and see what man said about the origin of the world. And what you will read is just absolutely ridiculous ideas, ridiculous theories. There was one theory, for example, that the world sits on a giant turtle. That's right. We're actually all riding the back of a giant turtle. What is that turtle standing on? More turtles. That's right. And what are those turtles standing on? Turtles all the way down. We just got turtles forever. You laugh. That's what it is. You see, the idea of where the world came from, while we look at it as like simple, this came before that and that must come before that, not so simple. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you something very interesting. The idea of dinosaurs. Do we believe in dinosaurs? Of course we do. Of course we do. I was once speaking to the Mashgiach of Mir Yeshiva, and I said, I was speaking to him, do we believe in dinosaurs? He said to me, did you fill up your gas tank recently? I said, yes. He said, what do you think you filled it up with? Fossil fuel. It's dinosaurs. You filled it up with dinosaurs. What do you think you're putting in? You're putting in dead dinosaurs. Yeah, you never thought of it like that. Dead dinosaurs, Shell and Sunoco. He says, yeah. But not only that, but what does the Torah call them? The Torah actually mentions dinosaurs that one place and never again. It says, es ha-taninim ha-gedolim. What is the tanin?
It's like a sea monster.
It doesn't really, I don't know where people get sea from.
I don't know.
What is tanin? Tanin is a reptile. Correct. Well, how do we know it's tanin is a reptile? Because you look in Shemais, where it keeps interchanging the word tanin and nachash. Tanin and nachash. Tanin is a reptile. Taninim ha-gedolim. What is gedolim? Is big. And the big reptiles. Does anyone know what the word dinosaur means? Big reptiles. That's right. But not only that. Even according to science today, where do birds come from? Birds were actually from birds actually came from dinosaurs. As a matter of fact, I've been to museums where they have old dinosaurs that have feathers that were the origin of birds. Well, guess what? You will see in the right place in the Torah, we got bird, we had fish, because some did come from the sea. We had birds and we had dinosaurs, all clumped together before the mammals. Do we need this? Do we say, yeah, now we got the emes? No. Emunah Pshuta would be a lot more delicious, and we could just say Emunah Pshuta, that's it. But just in case you hear these things, and you say, you know what, on one hand I'm living in the world, on the other hand I'm believing this. What do I believe? It's not a stira. It's not a stira. It's not a stira. Even the age of the universe, which is not kedai to go into now, you could go, I'm sure, to Torah anytime. Gerald Schroeder speaks about it. There are different understandings on how time developed, because time was fluid. Time wasn't always the same. Perhaps I'm going to give you a very, very simplistic way of looking at it, but I will not do it justice. So if anyone's watching and say, "Oh, Klatzko gave it over," this is not giving it over. But the concept being that when time began, when the world began, it began originally with time. In other words, time was the very first of all creations. The very first creation was time. It's a trivia question. What's the first creation? It's time. How do you know that? Well, Bereshis is a conjugation, because it could have said Reshis bara Elokim. Bereshis is bara Reshis. He created a beginning, or created time. The Reshis, the time, is the first creation. So when the Big Bang began, or whatever we're going to call it, Gerald Short likes to say, Big Bang Bereshis bara. It's not a coincidence. Bays. Who knows? Okay. The shortage rush. I don't know. But the idea is, in the beginning, when time began, time was a momentary phenomenon. And then it grew. And as the universe expanded, time also expanded. So if you were traveling in time, then time would go very quickly going forward. But if you went backwards in time, then time would take much, much longer, because the amount of time that time takes to tick off becomes much, much longer as time expands upon itself. Right? So how do I explain this? I'll give you an imagery. We'll see if this works for you. Imagine you have a rubber band, and you're going along the rubber band, but the rubber band is stretching as you go. So as you go, it's stretching more and more. Now you got to go back in the rubber band. It will take you much longer to get back to the original rubber band than it took you to go forward. So, right, that's right. It's another way of understanding it. If you're going, or a treadmill. So if you're going on a treadmill, let's say you were going together with the treadmill, right? You're not trying to lose weight, but you're going together with the treadmill. You go with the treadmill, well, you'll fall off in a second. But let's say it's a very long treadmill. You'll be going very quickly. But then if you want to go back, then you're going against time. You're traveling against time. So when we have to figure out how long something took, we're going back in time. So it takes a lot longer. Gerald Shorter takes a whole book to say what I just said in 2 minutes. So don't think I've done it justice. But that's just an understanding of how time ticked off. Right? Even the idea of there being humanoids before Adam and Chava is a possibility. Right, that's right. Meaning that Adam and Chava could have very well been the first human beings that had a neshama. Hashem gave them a neshama. But before, there could have been other human beings. Not only could there have been, but there is a Medrash and there is a Ramban that says clearly that there were other beings, and those beings did many things that we did. They ate like we did, they did tashmish like we did, just they were missing the neshama. And it's yitachem like that. It's logical like that. First off, the Torah actually does speak about the creation of two human beings. In Perek Aleph, it speaks about the homogeneous creation of people, general people, and then later on, Perek Beis speaks about Adam and Chava specifically. So I have heard of Pshat. I actually heard this from Schroeder. So I'm not sure where he gets it from. I'm sure he usually brings down makars, but that Perek Aleph and Perek Beis, one was speaking about people in general, and one was speaking about Adam and Chava in particular. And what was so unique about Adam and Chava? That they had a neshama. What is neshama? Neshama is, like it says in Onkelos, ruach memalala, the ability to communicate in a sophisticated way. So Adam and Chava were unique in that they were able to communicate in a sophisticated way. What is sophisticated? Sophisticated means that they were able to communicate in a way that that was not concrete. Now I eat, now I kill, but to connect with ideas like abstract. Correct. That's what I'm looking for. An abstract way. And we know that today, if we look at drawings. Thank you so much. For drawings and communications of ancient people, we know that meaningful communication took place. Started off about 5,000 years ago, exactly when Adam and Chava lived. Not only that, thank you.
Also written history started.
That's right. Not only that, but we know, for example, that Cain and Abel had to marry somebody. We know that Cain said, "V'haya kol moitzai hargeni," anyone who finds me is going to kill me. Who was there to find him? No one. If Adam and Chava and Cain and Abel were the only ones around, then who was left? So who's going to be the Moitzai? So it could very well be. In other words, Hashem, and I'm not saying this is how it is or that's how it is. What I'm saying is that there is room in the Torah without torturing the pshat, without torturing, to say this is how it happened, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not feel it necessary to go into all the details. It's a very important klal to know. Because when you hear something in science and you're taken aback, oh, what do you do about this? What do you do about that? And we get stuck. We say, let's see how this fits into Torah. We don't naturally have to think that the Torah is against what you're hearing from science. That is the beginning of how to approach an apikairos. He says, oh, what do you do with science? Great, whatever science. Yeah, the Torah does, the Torah not. The Torah took 400 psukim to explain the Mishkan. So the Torah wanted me to know how to build a Mishkan. Nuts and bolts, to crush them and outdone them. You have to know how to build it. HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not need us to build the universe. So He didn't tell us about oxygen, and He didn't tell us about hydrogen, and He didn't tell us about gravity, and He didn't tell us about evolution either. He didn't tell us how this came to that. So I always say we could believe in evolution. The only thing we can't, and obviously don't believe, is random evolution. Random evolution means it came by itself. No. Don't say how Hashem made this and made that. Fakir. It does say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu started the world with a point the size of a mustard seed, and within that point lay the koiches of the entire universe. You have to understand what that means. That means in a tiny little point were billions and trillions and much, much more galaxies and people all within something the size of a mustard seed. Guess what? That's exactly what evolution says as well. Big Bang started with an infinite point. A singularity is what it's called. And from that singularity came about the world. What's the problem? And if we don't understand, I want to tell you, science is clueless about so many things. And it's really become a religion. Things that we assume scientists know, they don't. Things like how aspirin works. Science has no idea how aspirin works. How does sleep work? No, we don't know that either. We don't even know. We're so involved in sleep, a third of our life we're sleeping, and science has no idea. Where did water come from? They used to believe it came from comets. Now they say it couldn't come from comets. It did, it didn't. It came from Hashem. However Hashem wanted it to come, it came. And however science eventually comes to their conclusion that the water came, so maybe that's how Hashem made it. Doesn't bother me. Okay. I'm going to speak about something else now when it comes to how to answer an apikairos. This is very important to know. It is a mindset that's important to know. Apikairosim, people who don't believe in Torah and mitzvahs, like to jump on derabbanans. They like to jump on gezeiros. Where does this come from? They added this, they added that, they didn't know, they did know. I want to tell you the correct way of looking at the Chachamim is as follows. Two things to know. Number one, Chachamim have what's called Da'as Torah. Now it's a very funny thing, because today, this is very recent, the words Da'as Torah have become a dirty word, almost a curse word in the secular world. Oh, if Da'as Torah, they have Da'as Torah. What is Da'as Torah? What does it mean? So they like to knock it, but they don't get it. I'm going to give you a very simple way of understanding what Da'as Torah is, then you take it from there. Any of you ever play the game of Tetris? Ever play Tetris? We've all played Tetris, right? We use that for L'chadaydi, right? Beautiful tune, nice Russian tune. So, what is the game of Tetris? You're dating yourself.
That's fine.
Yeah, it's okay. Tetris is this little electronic game that blocks in different shapes come down, and you have to flip over the blocks to create a complete line. And when you've created a complete line, then that line disappears. But if you don't rotate the blocks or the shapes the right way, then a line on the bottom will not be completed, and then that line will just remain. And then you have another line until there's no room for you to rotate, and then you've lost the game. Right? Just explain Tetris in a nutshell. Wow. So, if you've ever played Tetris for a long time, you'll relate to what I'm saying. You played it for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and then you put your Game Boy or whatever it is down, and you walk around the room, and suddenly you're flipping everything in your mind.
Sounds like Picasso, He reduced everything to like its most simplistic form,
You play it, you'll see it. It's very. I played it for like 2 days, the first time I ever saw it, and then I said, "Gotta get rid of this. This is bad." We don't allow video games in the house, anyways. But, but you can relate to what I'm saying. Right? You all can. It's impossible not to. You spend a few hours flipping it in your mind. You're flipping the room around, right? Why? Because you've calibrated your brain to Tetris. That's how it is. Your mind has become calibrated to the way Tetris thinks. A Talmud Chacham who sits and learns Torah day and night, they have calibrated their brain to Das Hashem, to the wisdom of Hashem. If you learn Torah, you are learning the wisdom of the Almighty, and your brain becomes calibrated. And therefore, when you have questions about what the Chacham say, when the Chacham themselves, when they get a question, they use the calibration that their minds are used to figure out what would be the Ratzon Hashem, what is the Das Hashem. It's very simple. That is one idea. Okay? Now, I'm not even speaking about their Heiligkeit, their holiness. I'm not even speaking about their tzidkus. I'm just speaking about, simply put, the Vilna Gaon, when he used to have a very difficult question from the community, a communal question, what do I do? What he would do is he would open up a sefer and learn very, very, very hard. And Vilna Gaon always learned hard. So can you imagine this extra hard for 6 hours? And then when he finished 6 hours, he'd lift his head up, and the first answer that came to mind is the answer that he would give. Why? Because you've just spent 6 hours calibrating his Das, to Das Elokim, Das Hashem. That's how Das Torah works. That's one idea it's important to know. Second idea. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives special siyata d'shmaya to those who lead Klal Yisrael. If there's somebody who takes upon themselves the leadership of the Jewish people, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'm going to give them siyata d'shmaya, and I'm going to allow them to come up with the right answer. This is called Yiftach B'dorah K'shmo B'dorah. You could have somebody who maybe in 100 years ago wouldn't have ranked. He would have been a minor Rebbe in Kelm. But today, he is our Rosh Yeshiva. And if he's our Rosh Yeshiva, he has Da'as Torah. People like to scoff. The world has always been full of naysayers and people who laugh at the Chacham. This is not new. The only difference is that today you have blogs where they scream about it with chutzpah that they just write about it for all to see. Or you'll even have Nebuch, there's a website called Was is Nayes, which is Jewish news, and yet when they put out something that the Chacham said, right away everyone's bashing. Oh, again, trying to make things hard for the Jewish people. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives special siyata d'shmaya to the Gedolim to lead Klal Yisrael. And what they tell us is correct. I want to tell you, they came out with a edict, a decree against texting for yeshiva bacher. And I spoke to one bacher, and the bacher was very upset. He said, they've gone too far. Went too far. I have text and I use it. There's nothing to be worried about. That's what the bacher said. Guess what happened to that bacher? He met a girl. The girl asked for his phone number. She texted him. She had a friend. The friend also texted him. Within 6 months, the guy had fallen many madrigas. I had a chance to meet that bacher again. I said, no, are you Maida yet? Are you Maida? Our Chachamim know more than you? Huh? Took another 6 months. Hitting rock bottom. Are you Maida? The Chachamim have an insight. That is how it works. Now, let me tell you, although I said there were 2 points, let me give you the third point. And this is a very critical point. We do not live in a bubble. We do not live on paper. We live real lives. We live in real societies with real problems and real issues. And therefore, in real societies that have real problems, you need leadership. And you need laws. And you need some sort of a governing body to make it all work. And without that governing body, it's all on paper. It doesn't really work. If a person says, you know what, I have my Torah, I've got my book, I've got my this, I've got my Gemara, my Mishnayos, I'm good to go. They're not living in the real world. The real world simply needs Jewish leaders in order to function. In order to function, we need, it's no less than a government that needs decrees when there are issues and when there are problems. We are fortunate that the way our government works is not through elections and not through bribery and not through swindling, but simply put, the great tzaddikim rise to the top. They rise to the top. Klal Yisrael, we're not fools. We're really not. When there are people who are echad b'peh, echad b'leiv, they look like they're one thing, but they're really shysters, they're really frauds. The Jewish people find them out. Those people don't become our gedolim. We're a stubborn nation. We're a stiff-necked nation. We're not going to let some politician tell us how halacha and das Torah. We're not going to. It's not going to happen. And all you got to do is look back at who our gedolim were and are. You see, they were derech now covered, ran away. Today, Gadol in America, Shmuel Kamenetsky, father of Yaakov Kamenetsky. Now, you know anything about Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky? Was he a covered person? The quietest, humblest, sweetest, most knowledgeable person you'll ever meet. He became the Gadol Ador. His son, Rabbi Shmuel Kamenetsky, has a heart as wide as the ocean. It's funny. I was in a store once in Muncie, and I'm standing behind a kid. The kid was a kid at risk, for whatever that means. I know him. He's been to my house before, and I had just gotten off the phone with Shmuel Kamenetsky. I think I may have left him a message. So this kid at risk behind me says, "Oh, you know Rabbi Shmuel?" I said, "I don't really know, but I asked him the shayos." He goes, "Oh, I know Rabbi Shmuel. He's my friend." I said, "He's your friend? How's he your friend?" He's a 19-year-old kid. He goes, "I met him once and took my number, and he calls me every Friday to wish me good Shabbos." Shmuel Kamenetsky calls you every Shabbos, every Friday to wish you good Shabbos. Who are you? He's a little kid is. Shmuel, so he needed it. So every Friday, this Gadol Ador is busy with the whole world, has time to call this fellow up to say good Shabbos. I wonder if the kid's bored of it already. He just doesn't even answer. These are our gedolim. Rav Moshe Feinstein. You know the story of Rav Moshe Feinstein and the car door? You don't know. I got to tell it to you. Rav Moshe Feinstein every day used to be picked up from his apartment, Lower East Side, and brought to MTJ. Mr. Ferris Yerushalayim. My kids go to Staten Island. It's MTJ as well. There, Reb David Feinstein is the Rosh Yeshiva today at MTJ in the Lower East Side. So each day, another Bachur would pick him up. It was a new Bachur's turn, and he says, "Rav Moshe, please come in." And he's picking up Rav Moshe in the car, and he slams the door on all of Rav Moshe's fingers. Can you imagine the agony? All of the fingers. Well, Rav Moshe, in a microsecond, right away realized If he would scream, what's going to happen to this boy? This boy is going to feel terrible. This boy is going to feel awful. And this boy is never going to be able to look in the mirror. He'll be beside himself with grief. And therefore, Rav Moshe Feinstein didn't say a word the whole trip. And the boy said, oh, what does Rosh Hashanah think about this and that? And Rav Moshe holding his hand until they reach the yeshiva. He says, thank you very much. He goes into his room, shuts the door of his office, and there in the privacy and solitude of his own room, that's what a gadol is. That one moment. Instead of saying, how dare you? Do you think Barack Obama wouldn't have said, Abraham Lincoln? Anyone would have said, They would have screamed and fired the guy. Not our gadol. No. You think Rav Shach who had to speak out against what he had to speak out? You think Rav Shach was looking for cover? You know how Rav Shach lived? I was in Rav Shach's house a few times. Could fit Rav Shach's whole apartment into my dining room. It was a tiny little apartment. He didn't need cover. He didn't need anything. I was a little bacher. I came to speak to him a few times. He sat down with me. Half an hour to shot. He's got nothing to do with to speak to me. He asked about my yeshiva. Where do I learn? What's the derech halimud? And he listened. He didn't just he's just doing what he's got to do to make me feel good. He listened. How do I know? A few months later, a new bacher came to our yeshiva. And I said to this bacher, how did you find out about our yeshiva? It's a smaller yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael. He said, I went to Rav Shach to speak to him about places. And Rav Shach said he just heard about this place. He thinks I should go there. Rav Shach was listening to me. Look at our gedolim. They give of themselves and they give and they give and they give and they give. And yet the bloggers, his court and his this and his that. These arrogant people. You know who they are? It's very easy to see who they are. Very easy. They're lonely single people. Almost all of them are single. They're lonely old men, 45, left the derech, axe the grind, no longer Frum, but they know it all because they made it through, 9th grade in Masiftas Torah, wherever they did. So they know the yeshiva system. You bet they know, right? And they've been burnt, so now they're gonna stick it to it. They don't know anything. And yet these they're very terrifying. And again, a few years ago, the Gedolim spoke out in the Agudath convention, and the topic was blogs. And again, we go, the Gedolim texting and blogs. Well, guess what? I have to do battle every day with people who've been affected and are going off the derech because of blogs. It's amazing to me how clearly, how lucidly they chop the danger of every apikoros writing his word down as if it was Torah Moshe Sinai. They chopped. We didn't. They did because they're gedolim. Their foresight was so amazing. So we said a few things. We said that Torah comes from calibrating one's mind. We said that these are people who have siyata d'shmaya because they're here to lead Klal Yisrael, and they get special siyata d'shmaya because of that. And we said that no matter what you think, we do need leaders, and we need a governing body, and we need the Jewish people to function. You see, I'll tell you something. There's so much to say about this. We'll be done very shortly.
You can go on as long as you'd like.
No, I don't want to keep anyone hostage here.
They can leave. I'm staying.
Yeah. Okay. I'll tell you something. The Gedolim do not try to make life tough for Klal Yisrael. They don't. As a matter of fact, the Gedolim don't even like to make takanas. They don't. If you try to look for major takanas in the last 1,000 years, you're going to come up nearly empty. Nearly empty. No major, very few major. I don't mean one Hasidus, they could be the Rebbe made this takana for his Hasidim, but I'm talking about Klal Yisrael wide. When they speak out, the only difference is they're not quick. They don't rush head first into change. Torah is so important. The Ratzon Hashem is so important that if we have to change anything, if we have to bend in any way, we want to make sure it's the correct thing. It's the right thing. It's done with forethought. Will the Gedolim be able to ban the internet forever? No. They won't. It's here to stay. And eventually, everything that you do from signing your children up to Cheder is going to be online. Eventually it will. Eventually, there are reasons that it is. But they said, slow down. Slow down. There's danger involved. There are things that can hurt you, that can affect you. Put up safeguards. You know, my website, Shabbat.com, I used to be called See You on Shabbos, but Shabbat.com, it was the first website to get a Haskalah from the Gedolim. First one. Oh, wow. Right? So people said, how could it be? How could they get... It's the internet. And eventually they're going to use... We're not going to take away a tool that could be used for amazing Agudath Israel, that could be used for Shidduchim. Eventually it will. But we don't rush head first into it. Because there's danger involved. Just like there was danger on telephone. Believe me, when telephones were made up, wow, it's never been so easy to speak Lashon Hara. You can just pick up the phone, boom, boom. Just like texting. Everything. We don't shun. You know, the media likes to make it sound like we shun modernity. We don't. If it's modern, let's live back in the shtetl. We want to live in the shtetl. We want to go on a horse and buggy. We want to eat kreplach all day, and we want to have gribnas, and that's what we want. We want a little vodka, and we want some seltzer with some mishmal herring, and we're good to go. No, what are you talking about? If there's something that can be used, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave it as a tool for us. But the tool could be dangerous. And the tool has to have safeguards, and until there are safeguards that are in place. So today, for example, on the internet, there are some wonderful safeguards. First of all, there are safeguards that make sure that sites don't come up that have words or images that are not kosher. But there's also internet chavrusas, where each of the party, if two people sign up, so Ruvain gets every site that Shimon went to, and Shimon gets every site that Ruvain went to. That's a very good idea, right? There is such a thing out there. Whatever it is, it needs to be done with a kovid rosh, with forethought. We want to take advantage of the world, but we don't want to do it at the expense of Klal Yisrael. The secular world, I want to tell you something. The secular world, and even the more modern elements of the religious world, they're always trying to be innovative. There's something glorious about pushing the envelope. Yes, now we can have a minute with women. Now the women could be together with the men, but we could do it because they're using earplugs, so they're not really hearing the women, or the women are in the front, the men are in the back, so then they don't know exactly which lady is singing, and right on and on. There's this push to modernize Judaism. And we say slow, slow, slow. There's a reason that things happen like this until now. And don't assume that the reason is because Klal Yisrael are a bunch of fuddy-duddies until now. We weren't a bunch of fuddy-duddies. We were very sharp. We were very sharp. Jewish people have been accused of being everything by anti-Semites. Money hungry, greedy, separatist. Every kind of every kind of a bad name we've been called, except one thing: we've never been called stupid. We're not stupid. We understand potential of an internet. We understand innovation, but we also know that if you're reckless. I had this amazing experience. I can't begin to tell you how my jaw was on the floor. I was sitting in the shul of a rabbi. He happened to be a very modern Orthodox fellow. Not going to say his name. And it was a very, very left-wing kihila that I was davening at that Shabbos. And I was a visiting rabbi, and they had me sit up front. And it was during Shal Shabbos, and it was Erev Pesach. And the rabbi gets up and says, "I thought of a chiddush." He tells everyone, "I thought of a chiddush." You know what the chiddush is? We can take plates and silverware and dishes, put it in our dishwasher, put it on the highest temperature, and that will be Hagalas Kalim. So I turned to the guy next to me. I said, no, it wouldn't. It's not Hagalas Kalim. First of all, it's not going in water. The water is poured on top of it. But on top of that, the water's not hot enough. The water's not rolling, boiling. How hot is the water in the dishwasher? But I didn't scream it. I just mentioned it to him. So he mentioned it to the rabbi. And the rabbi, to his credit, issued a retraction by email a few days later saying, actually, he made a mistake. There is one industrial dishwasher that's used in the army whose temperature may get to be hot enough to be according to the Salem or I don't know what he was saying, but no one has that dishwasher in their house. But what was astounding to me, what was astonishing to me, was how quickly, easily, and nonchalantly this guy stood up and absolutely did away with the halacha. Just boom, without research. Do we want to make life hard? Would it be wonderful to put dishes in the dishwasher and have them all kosher lePesach? Machaya, right? But slow. Is that the right thing? Has it been researched? Is that the emes? It's an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing. It's okay to be skeptical about certain things. But when you're in a relationship, if you remain skeptical in that relationship, your relationship is really going to rot and die. There has to be a point, wherever that point is, that you say, you know what? This did it for me. I want to tell you something. I had a guy who went to a Baal Tshuva yeshiva. And never he was approached by a person who was going off the derech, and this person just began feeding him these blogs, and eventually this guy, he was going to become Frum, and then he left. He decided he's not going to. But it wasn't good enough that he didn't become Frum, but now he has to badmouth every fool who's in the yeshiva. So I told him, my dear friend, let me explain something to you. What do you think? So he says, look, these people, this is proof. This is proof. It's ridiculous. They hear a little something, that's good enough for them. So I say to him, okay, I want to ask something. What would be good enough for you? So he said, for me, I would need a proof like this, and this. So I told him, well, you know what? You're the idiot here. You know why? Because I will find people who will look at what you needed as proof, and they will say, why, you're such a fool, that's all you need. We need this. And then those people, I'll find another group who will say, that's all you need. We need this. So you know what it is? It's every person says, prove it to me to this degree, and that works for me. If you need more proof, great. But don't badmouth their proof, because whatever you need, I'll find someone who will badmouth your proof. Because you didn't do the work. You think you did the work? Because what made you the boss? What made you the authority over what it takes to prove a religion real? Whatever you needed, I'll show you someone who says that's not adequate. So for them, that's what it was adequate. When people say, oh, how does it, you go out with a girl 10, 15 times and you marry her, you're going in blind. I feel like I got to go out for 2 years. I said, why 2? Why not 10? 10? There's no question that 10 you will know more than 2. No, do you doubt that? No, 2 is enough. Well, I'll make 2. What about 2.5 years? I think another half year should do it for you. So 2.5 years is also enough. So again, you're the authority and it takes 2 years. So maybe I need to be in this, I need to meet this person for 15 solid dates at 3, 4, 5 hours a piece, plus check them out, find out what their family, find out what their friends say, and I'm satisfied. And I will know that I don't know everything, and I will relish the mystery that will unfold as our relationship blossoms. What's so bad about that? So the apikoros in general is just a very arrogant person who is lonely and just doesn't feel comfortable with himself. And therefore, he brings divrei Chazal that he can't understand. The only problem with an apikoros bring divrei Chazal is apikorosim aren't machshav Chazal. An apikoros is not machshav what Chazal is. So when we look at Chazal, when Abaye and Rabba say something, we know that these are people that can be Mechayim Mesim. And if they can be Mechayim Mesim, so when they say something, if I don't understand it, who's the one in the wrong? Who's the fool? Mir Abaye. But not for the Epikoros. For the Epikoros, Abaye is the one that's wrong. And this guy, this lonely single guy sitting in front of his computer in his pajamas and his cold coffee, he's right. He's right. How does he know? Because he saw it in a different blog. By another guy who's sitting in his pajamas. This guy's in his bathrobe. Right? Smoking, dipping the ashes in his coffee. Right? That's lonely people who want to bash Klal Yisrael. We have to feel good. We've made it till now. We will continue to. There will always be people who bash. There will always be people who look to find issues and problems. We have nothing to be afraid of. Documentary hypothesis, Wellenhausen, without even getting into it, the idea that 4 people wrote the Torah plus a 5th redactor, it's a crazy notion. There's actually there's a rabbi in the university that I know, not Apikoros, grew up from, but he's not Apikoros, who teaches that. Torah written by 5 people. A redactor. It's ridiculous. You know why it's ridiculous? I'll tell you. I'll tell you briefly why it's ridiculous. According to this theory, Torah is written by 4 different kinds of people. They're called JEPD. JEPD. Whatever. One writes Hashem's name one way, one writes Hashem, and the other way. One wrote Vayikra, one wrote Devarim, whatever it is. But the problem is that each of these people who say that J, for example, who wrote all this, refers constantly to E, P, and D. And E refers to J, P, and D, or E, whatever it is. They all refer to each other. Now, that doesn't make any sense. If they each wrote their own Torah, how could they be referring to each other? It's a stira. So what did Mr. Wellenhausen say? What's Wellenhausen's theory? Well, there was a 5th person named the redactor. And this redactor put them all together. And therefore, whenever J, what he did was he made J refer to E, so it would seem like one book. And P referred to D, so it would seem like one book. How very convenient. Now, documentary hypothesis can't be slugged up. Because whenever you have a stira, it's the redactor. You can't slug it up. Because how could J be? The redactor did it. So the basic rule when it comes to science is something that cannot be disproven, cannot be proven. And you can't disprove this. But even worse, you should never study this stuff, but I'm saying it because I'm theorizing, I began to realize the wonderful greatness of Torah Anytime, and I realized that actually many thousands of people watch this. And sometimes not because some watch this, or people who have doubts. So I want to tell you, this stuff is nonsense. And I'll tell you another, it's just using your brain. Okay, there was a redactor. What did the redactor do? The redactor took the 4 people who wrote the Torah, the JEPD, and put them all together. Stop and think about how ludicrous that notion is. What they're saying is that there were communities that believed that the correct Torah is J. There are communities that believe that it was E. Communities that believe that P and D. And then came along a man, and he got all the communities to agree that it's all 4 of them. Wow. He got all the Jews to agree that it's all 4. And very enlightened. And who is this mystery man who is as significant as Moshe Rabbeinu himself? Because he was able to get all the Jews to agree on one Torah. What's his name?
No, I don't know.
What was the redactor's name? In history, we know who our Gedolim are. We could trace ourselves back all the way. Of course not. Of course not. It wasn't Ezra, it wasn't... Who was that redactor? The answer is there was no redactor. If there was a redactor, then we would know his name. We'd be singing Hallel to him. We'd be mentioning him. The Torah, the Hasidim would have all sorts of drushes about the redactor. The very fact that there's not a single person in history that we can pin this heroic feat of getting all the Jews to agree what the Torah is, tells you the redactor never existed. Here is the final thing I want to say. A talk like this can go on for hours and hours nonstop. And I probably should have asked you for questions as well. Okay? Maybe perhaps we'll do that another time. But I want to tell you like this. Many years ago, I was in 7th grade. Not that many years ago. Many years ago. And our 7th grade math teacher said, you know what? I have a riddle for you. And if you could solve this riddle, you will get an A on the course. You won't have to take any more tests, no homework. You get a straight A. What's the riddle? He drew a box on the blackboard, on the chalkboard. A rectangular box. Then he divided it in the middle. Okay, visualize this. Divided in the middle. So now you have 2 thin rectangular boxes. And the top rectangular box, he divided that in half. And the bottom rectangular box, he divided that into thirds. And then he said, take your pen, and I want you to intersect every single line in this shape, every single line, without missing any lines, and without going over any lines twice. Go. So we drew this rectangular shape, boom, 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 and going through, and someone came, I got it! And went running up to Mr. Cohn. Mr. Cohn, look! And he says, no, you all you got to be, you missed, there's one little segment you missed. And people are getting very excited about it. And I had a really close friend named Benji Baskin. Benji Baskin was a very, very dear friend of mine. And he sits in back and he said, turn around. And I said, Benji, what you doing? You're doing your homework? I said, Benji, why are you doing your homework? Solve this and you'll have no more homework the rest of the semester. So Benji says, do you think the teacher would give us a problem that he could say you have a story? He has to teach us the material. It's impossible. So I got to jump on the homework. This way I have a free night. So I said, oh, Benji, you're making a big mistake. And for the next 45 minutes, we all try to solve it. Meanwhile, at the very end, Mr. Cohn says, well, actually, it is impossible. The only way to do it is to go through a line along the line so he didn't intersect it. But otherwise, it's really quite impossible. And we all had pie in our face, egg in our face, whatever the metaphor is. And Benji Baskin, meanwhile, had a free night because his homework was completed. So you may think that was a terrible experience for me, but it really wasn't, because years later, after I got married, sometimes I was called in to substitute in different schools. And sometimes the substitute didn't leave work for me. So whenever the substitute didn't leave work, I always had the puzzle in my back pocket. Say, okay guys, I'm going to offer you a reward. And depending what I had in my pocket, $20, $50, $100, $100. If you could solve it, the first guy to solve it, that's it. And I put the $100 bill on the table, put the shape on the blackboard, and say, okay, let's do it. And of course, that wasted the entire class, and I got paid. Terrible. Anyways, so someone once came to me and says, aren't you nervous that someone's going to solve it? Because like kids would come up, the nature of this puzzle is that it could really look like it was solved, because it has so many little segments. So I said, no, I'm not worried. I'm really not. I'm never worried I'm going to lose $100. I promise you, I'm not worried. But if they come up and they say, hey, Rabbi, I solved it, look. Even if at first glance it looks like it was solved, I know it wasn't. I just have to look more carefully, and then I'll see what they missed. I'm never scared. That's how I look at questions about Judaism. They're not going to stump Judaism, because Torah is Torah's emes. It is Kiyem Chayenu V'Arach Yameinu. It is what keeps the world going. And whether Hashem made the world through an evolutionary process, or whether He willed it into being. Whether He made Adam Arishon like this, or whether He made humanoids like that. Whether He put the Chacham like... I'm not concerned. If someone asks me a question and I can't answer it, it's like the puzzle. I know there's a good answer. I'm going to find it. I'm not going to be apologetic. I will find the answer. The world does not collapse because of a question. Doesn't. The world, believe me, the world keeps on going with questions. We're okay. But when there's a question, I know with the right person, with the right Talmud Chacham, I will get the right answer. And I'm never nervous. Judaism is the 800-pound gorilla that no one sees coming. You know that metaphor, 800-pound gorilla? A guy comes into the boxing ring and he says, I could beat anyone. And he says, I'll bet anything, $1,000 I can beat anyone. So the owner of the ring says, anyone? He goes, yeah. He goes, okay, I'll send in my guy. And his guy was an 800-pound gorilla. And the guy says, well, you said anyone. He said, okay. And this 800-pound gorilla comes and pounds him into the canvas. He didn't see this 800-pound gorilla coming. Judaism is the 800-pound gorilla that comes at you that you don't realize. Other religions, Christianity, is you know it's bogus. You know. Just do the math. Do the math. They all agree we're right. We don't agree that they're right. We're okay. It's the math. It's simple. Atheists, they're ridiculous because they say they know that there's no God. You can't know something. The most you could say is, I don't know how to prove God. You can't say, I know there's no God. Maybe you're just not proving God the right way. So the atheist is ridiculous. An agnostic, someone who's not sure, well, that's the idea. You know, we work, we struggle, we grow with our knowledge of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We have nothing to be scared of. We have nothing to be afraid of. Judaism works. And if it doesn't work exactly how you grew up, you could tweak it a little. As long as you stay faithful to halacha. Halacha is the key. Halacha is the gravity that keeps Judaism together. You leave halacha, you're finished. You keep halacha, say you want to put on a white yarmulke, put on a white yarmulke. You want to wear black stockings, wear black stockings. You want to wear this kind of hat, that kind of hat, a shtreimel, a cowboy hat, I don't really care. You know? Relationship with Hashem, like we always say, be in a relationship. Keep halacha. Halacha are the terms of those relationships. And whenever you have a question, just don't be worried, don't be scared, don't be nervous. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is correct. Moshe emes, v'Torah emes. And if we have a question, we'll go to the right authority. We'll be able to figure out an answer. And in case we don't, that's also okay. That's also okay. We'll have to be humble, and we'll have to say that eventually, one day, even Chazal said teiku sometimes. Even Chazal said we don't know. It's okay. Gemara didn't fall apart from teiku. Rashi said Eini Yodea countless times. The Rabbi Kiva Eger brings down every time the Rashi says Eini Yodea. I don't know. You could say I don't know. Just feel good. We're in a religion that works. We're in a Torah that's emes. If you feel that way, you'll live an exciting life. You'll live an emestic life. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu will grant you lots of bracha. Thank you very much.